I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. As part of this whole mindset thing, I've been thinking, over the years, and one of the things that really struck me is about how many of us often get defined, sometimes by ourselves, sometimes by others, in quite a narrow way. For example, by our inverted commas job. Kind of what line of work are you in? Well, I'm an architect, or I'm a florist, or an accountant, or I don't work. And there you go. It's kind of like the impression's been made. And it got me thinking that, our brains kind of make judgments really quickly, and we put people in boxes because of that. So we can end up being defined as something that isn't entirely representative of who we are or who we've become. And you might be thinking, okay, where are you going with all of this? I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, it's our entire being that makes us the individual through, our evolution. We do many things outside of work that aren't always talked about. We have and live our values, and each of these sort of shape our identity. My guest today is doing, kind of too many amazing things to be defined by any one of them. She's best known for her music in Screaming Females, a band whose whole ethos of self-sufficiency, open-mindedness, strong integrity and ability to evolve without ever not being the Screaming Females, I just love. She writes phenomenal melodies, harmonies and lyrics with both the band and on her own. And do check out her solo album Peace Meter for what I think is like a real, kind of masterclass in how to write, pretty much perfect songs. She makes really thought-provoking art through drawing on everything from postcards to buildings to ceramics, and she's been collaborating on a graphic novel and sings and plays the guitar really with such character and individuality. I'm sure there'll be more than that, but it's just that my research has probably come up short yet again. So before I lose any more listeners anyway, Marissa Paternoster, welcome and thanks so much for coming on. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Not at all. So this whole kind of thing about sort of definition. I was thinking of it's sort of been on my mind really, and I was thinking about some of the kind of like musicians sort of have so many sort of strings to their bow, I guess, sort of involving different things. And I was thinking of some other examples, like kind of one of the early episodes I did was with Jennifer Finch. She said, she doesn't really think of herself as a musician, rather a kind of musical performer. And she's got so many other things. She's got like photography, a multimedia, web design, things like that. And I just think that sometimes we do tend to define ourselves a little bit narrowly. What do you think? What's your take on that?
I actually spend a lot of time thinking and talking about trying to not completely define my character within the boundaries of how people see me in Screaming Females. Because it's really difficult, if not impossible, to separate myself from what I do and what I've done in Screaming Females. And it's my whole world, and a lot of my the most formative experiences that I have as a young adult were through the lens of Screaming Females. And I am fine with that. I'm very proud of our band and everything we've done, and I love the memories that we've made together. But when you have so much of yourself invested in one thing, it is really scary because nothing lasts forever. So I definitely spend a lot of time, like I said, talking mostly to my therapist, but to my friends as well, about like how to conjure up my own identity. And I think it really flummoxes a lot of people because it is pretty much impossible to not look back on my life and pretty much just see the words like Screaming Females and like flashing lights, because that's pretty much, it's been all I've done from the ages of 19 to 36, and prior to that I was in school. So
I was,
um,
yeah, I was going to say yours is, yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? That's pretty much how, it's not the right phrase, but you made your name per se. Is that it's because the formation of the band, like you say, when you're kind of 18, 19, and that's been a lot of what you've done. And I guess it's sort of human nature, isn't it? That we like to. How do we see people, and it's things that are kind of familiar, I guess.
yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, it's I have no regrets like going full throttle into screaming females and dedicating my life to it was part of the plan. And like
Mm,
um but I think if you told me when I was 19 that I would be 36 and I'd still be having the opportunity to do this, I'd be floored. But anyway, it was the plan and the plan's going well. um it is hard to separate yourself from the way that people see you. I know that I contain like a wide array of I have a wide array of interests and hobbies and things like that often don't get showcased. But for the most part, my interests and hobbies do primarily revolve around how people perceive me and screaming females. When you called me, I was painting. And a
mm,
big part of how I'm perceived as a member of Screaming Females is the person who draws all the album art.
just the art.
So that's true, like and then even before you called and I was painting, I was playing the piano. So it's like I really truly am, I feel like sometimes absurdly comical reflection of the way that people perceive me and that my life is probably exactly what people might expect it to be like.
With your, I mean, the art is obviously, yeah, as you say, you sort of do the band's artwork, and then there's other artwork that you do. Kind of like where does that sort of sit in terms of uh, I don't want to say importance to you, because that's not the right word, but where does that sort of fit into your life?
I understand what you're saying. I mean, art has visual art in particular has always been like a massive part of my life. And prior to my interest in punk and rock and roll and stuff, I really was just interested in cartoons and cartooning, comic
Mm,
books, and like I wasn't super into like I didn't know that much about fine art yet, but my mother was an art teacher, so I had a lot of
mm,
early exposure to fine art, like um, and we lived in close proximity to Manhattan, so we would go to the Whitney and the Guggenheim and stuff.
mm,
So I grew up surrounded by that stuff, and uh, drawing for me has always served as a really therapeutic mechanism. It's a very
mm,
private activity. I don't usually draw or paint with others, although I have, and it's
mm,
fun. Um, but at the end of the day, I feel like I can only lean back on the fact that if I have a pencil and a piece of paper, I could probably entertain myself for a considerable amount of time. So, drawing has been just like so important to me throughout my entire life. It's probably my favorite thing in the whole wide world to do.
mm.
Um, and I can bring it wherever I go. So it's been a great asset uh, for me as a traveling musician.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I sort of recently did an online graphic design course. It's only a short one, about sort of 4 weeks worth, where you just sort of do a little sort of project, and the I'd sort of pushed myself into sort of doing it, and sort of it was way outside my comfort zone. I'd never really done it before, and I'd loved it. Just the additional kind of um, excitement that it gave me just doing that. It just kind of like, okay, this is something that I could do. I could really sort of have a go at this, and it like you say, that kind of therapeutic side of it, of kind of creating. different kind of images and visuals, and I was doing some collage stuff as well as some stuff on the computer and have you. And the other thing that I did recently, which was different, was stream of consciousness writing, which was like mind blowing the first time I did that. In terms of just seeing what's up there, what's coming out, just incredible.
Yeah, I can't say enough for, the, like, incredible role that drawing and painting in particular has been in my life, and, if it wasn't for, um, like, underground comics, being introduced to, like, Art Crumb and, like, Art Spiegelman at a young age, I don't know if I would have necessarily been compelled to be interested in punk or have found punk rock. I think,
Mm,
things like underground cartoons and underground music obviously are inextricably linked.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
What was
love to
it?
draw.
What was it about the comics that kind of grabbed you when you first got into those?
I don't know, I was so young.
Mm,
I think with a lot of the cartoons and comics that I liked, there was a lot of uh, crassness to them, toilet humor,
yeah,
humor
yeah,
that kids like. So, even though a lot of the art from stuff was probably stuff that I shouldn't have been looking at such a young age, there were some like really lewd comics that like I felt like I shouldn't be seeing. So there was kind of this pervasiveness about it and this danger to it. And then
mm,
even cartoons that were on just regular ass cable TV, like Ren and Stimpy, were also incredibly weird, finely drawn, uh, kind of disgusting cartoons. And
yeah, yeah,
I was a preteen, so jokes about boogers and barf and
yeah,
um, stuff like that really yucked me up, So I was really had a connection with that stuff, but I also thought the drawings were really cool,
mm,
and that kind of extended. And this interest never really like spread its wings. But I remember like really being I would watch a lot of anime. I had no idea what was going on. I've always mean to like kind of follow that trail again and like rediscover what the hell was going on when I was watching anime.
yeah, yeah,
Because I didn't understand it, the age of 12. But I was like, wow, these drawings are really cool. I was also super into like Todd McFarlane and Spawn, which is also probably a comic I shouldn't have been looking at when I was like 12 years old or whatever, because it's incredibly violent. There's a lot of like graphic sex in it. But I thought those were drawings were like some of the fucking coolest things that I had ever seen.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was just really into all that stuff. I wanted to be able to draw like that, and I can't, but I draw another way.
I think that art as y as a kind of integral part of kind of music, of sort of producing a sort of piece of music for me was, if I think back to, I mean, I was born in '68. So when I was started listening to music, it was, or kind of going to record shops and buy music, it was what, sort of late '70s, early '80s, that kind of time. And I remember going into like my local record store and seeing kind of albums by like Susie and the Banshees and Killing Joke and Adam and the Ants and Bauhaus and stuff like that, and it was really the artwork that just kind of like, I was just like, wow, it's just like looking through the looking glass. There was like this world on the other side. It really kind of did something to you because I couldn't hear it. I hadn't heard the music. There was no way of listening to it. You're just going by the cover. It was just really exciting seeing that art. It really did something.
Yeah, I mean, if an album has a cool cover, prior to having the world of music accessible to me via my phone, like if I went to the record store as a teenager, sometimes I would buy records truly just because the cover looked cool. And
Mm,
sometimes I would be met with a wonderful surprise, and sometimes I'd be really disappointed, but that was how you rolled the dice back then.
yeah.
And, I think bands like Susie and the Banshees and the Killing Joke are like examples of bands where there are people who just want to be involved in art in like whatever capacity, and in the way that like Darby Crush was a poet and then he wound up in like a punk band. Like
Yeah.
they just you just want to be surrounded by art when it's just like seems like if it isn't an integral part of your life, then you're just gonna drop dead. And sometimes you wind up in a punk band or a band of any inclination,
Yeah.
and sometimes maybe you become a published poet, or maybe you become a journalist, or you find out a way to kind of harness your craft and hopefully be able to practice it through
Mm,
whatever your occupation may be. And I've had the wonderful luck of being able to be in a band and make the album art and stuff.
yeah.
Um, so I got both the things I wanted.
Go back to, I mean, we just talked about what attracted you to the, sort of comic world. When you, I mean, I guess it's sort of been well documented about how, when you got into the sort of the underground punk scene. But again, what was it, and how did it make you feel when you were kind of like getting into that scene when you sort of first arrived in New Brunswick, wasn't it? And really, what was it that what feelings were you getting there?
um, well, I first started reading like comic books, and I am not fluent in the language of comic books at all. So
Mm.
I just want to preface whatever I'm going to say with that. Is that my interest in that was truly just because of my parents. My parents are, hippies, I guess, like New
Mm.
Jersey brand hippies, which is like a very unique type of hippie. Maybe like rehabilitated hippies, but they're both teachers, and there was no censorship in my house.
Mm.
So I guess we probably had like some crumb like anthologies laying around, and I was really into like Calvin and Hobbes and the Far Side stuff that kids.
Yeah.
So my mother especially just kind of like encouraged me to look at more comics, and
Brilliant.
uh would buy me pretty much whatever comic I wanted. So I got a lot of support from both of my parents in terms of like going to the art store to get sketch pads, and once I got to New Brunswick, that my interest in comics had largely faded away in favor of being like completely obsessed with punk
Mm.
and wanting to be in a band very, very badly. But my interest in drawing never faded away, and I
Mm.
was actually going to art school, so there's that.
It's a good job it didn't fade away then, isn't it? Since you're art.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I had to finish college, so I did manage to do that somehow.
It's good that I mean, it's good that you had that kind of support from from your parents with doing that. I mean, I think back to like myself, and I don't like in terms of that kind of art and that sort of creativity. I didn't really have that. I mean, I was kind of sort of taught to play the cello when I was a kid, so I was maybe 16. I did really well at it, but that sort of coincided and crossed over with my love of punk music. And as a kind of teenager, I couldn't reconcile them, and also kind of felt that I was sort of being sort of pushed into it a little bit, So I kind of rebelled and packed it in and all that. And I look back now and think, do you know what? Wrong time, wrong place. But I still wish I could turn the clock back almost and still do it. Maybe I was just a bit irrational, at the time.
I don't know. I mean, I I give it up for my parents big time. I never felt discouraged for a second. I never felt like
Mm,
I was being told to do something that I didn't want to do. There are very few instances where I remember either my mother or my father being like, "You need to play a sport." I actually put a lot of that pressure on myself because I
yeah.
was my interests were so skewed outside of what all the other kids were doing, and I felt a lot of shame because of that. So I think I
Mm,
tried to force myself to do things that made me uncomfortable way more
mm,
often than either of my parents did. And I don't know if that's just because they're rad people or because they're
mm,
teachers and they know that you should always uh, kind of like entertain a young person's interests and encourage them.
yeah.
to see whatever they could see through. I have no idea, but I was very lucky.
It's an interesting one that you mentioned about shame, and I think like when I was sort of playing the cello, I think at that age, I kind of I felt kind of embarrassment because there weren't other the other people that I was sort of hanging out with weren't doing that, and then I would have to kind of go off and do this, and I didn't really want to do it, and I guess I tried to hide it, and it's yeah, it wasn't a particularly sort of happy time doing that. It's a funny kind of like feeling at that age, isn't it? When you're kind of going through that, and I guess I felt I just wanted to fit in and do what the others were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully I don't know what it's like for kids now. It seems though from some of the young people I talk to, it shows um, that uh, teenagers are a lot more forgiving with each other
Mm,
nowadays and a
I
lot
think
more
so.
understanding. Um, and you know, I love them. I wish I could have experienced that, but it's great that it's happening now. I think I don't talk to a lot of teens.
I remember when I think I must have been I must have been around about sort of 16 or so, and I remember being feeling absolutely humiliated because like my bag had my kind of school bag. I'd sort of written all as you did then, kind of wrote all the names of your favorite bands, and mine was sort of quite eclectic, and there was some bands on there that from a this sort of obsession with genre. So there's like the Clash on there, for example, and then the teardrop explodes. And in kind of like other kind of school kids' minds, those two just never met. It's like like how the fuck can you be into both of them? And I was just like, oh my god, somebody's got my bag and they're just looking at it and laughing at it. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I definitely didn't give a shit about any of that stuff. I was like one of 4 kids in my school who listened to like guitar driven music or was like outwardly a fan of music. So my friends in high school all listened to different music bands that I wasn't necessarily into, but it didn't really matter because we were all just like there were so few of us. Um
Mm.
we were all just like the only other people who would go to a show with me were my 3 buds in high school, and they might have been into different bands, but we didn't really get up each other's asses about that stuff.
What about the other kids that were sort of outside, or the others that were outside of that group of 3 or 4? Or did you just didn't
Um,
mix?
I mean, I went to a high school that was super chill.
Mm,
Um, I I actually wound up going to the school because I was being bullied so much in my grammar
mm,
school, and I switched to my high school, and no one really bothered me. I just
mm,
there were a couple like new metal kids. I remember there were a couple like more popular kids who like smoked weed and listened to new metal.
mm,
That there was a little bit of crossover between my friend group and them, but I was mostly buds with very sober, very
mm,
quiet, very bookish kids who listened to like emo and indie rock.
mm.
And then the other kids who were just like part of the mainstream, Lord knows what they were listening to, probably whatever was on Hot 97, which is tight because it was probably really good. I
Were you would you have called yourself a curious kid?
was curious about the things that I was interested in, and
Mm,
I was very, very hyper fixated on punk, specifically Riot Girl. Um, but beyond that, I wouldn't say that I was really curious. I felt kind of like I was just hanging out, waiting until I could be an adult.
mm, yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of was waiting until I could either be an adult so I could be in a band or be an adult so I could, be an artist. I just was ready to be done with childhood for sure.
Yeah, get out of that and get into the adult world.
Yeah.
And, with the, like, sort of first band that you kinda got into, um, what? was that kind of like-minded people that you were sort of hanging out with? Was it a sort of
Well, one of the one
no,
of
go
the
on.
people was Mike, so yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then the other kids in the band were just kinda, like, from the neighborhood. My friend Chris Bobbins, who's still my buddy,
Mm,
um, played keys, and we liked totally different music, but we were still both just really excited fans of music. So, like, he listened to Medeski, Martin and Wood and, like, Fish and stuff, and I hated stuff like that at the time.
yeah.
Um, Now I celebrate Medeski, Martin and Wood. Still not much of a Fish fan, but, like, to circle back, it's like, I drove Chris to school every single day, and he was in a band with Mike and I, because he was just a fan of music. But, like, yes, we got into arguments a lot about whether or not, like, this particular Fish song was good, or if we needed
Mm,
to incorporate the Circle of Fifths in, like, a song that we were writing or something like that. But what we really, I think, valued without ever talking about it or even realizing it is just that we all just really fucking love music, and we
mm,
wanted to be a part of it. And, growing up in suburban New Jersey in the early 2000s, there weren't a lot of other people who were interested in, like, being in a band.
mm,
Um, it just wasn't a popular thing to do, to my knowledge, and,
mm.
so I found the people who were, and I never let them go.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? How people it's almost like, in a way, kind of serendipitous. It's hard to sort of work out how it happens. When you just sort of find your people. And there's like a sort of natural evolution. Obviously, with Mike, that's been a lifelong thing from there on in. And you find people that where you have that kind of common interest, and something like music is so kind of strong that such a strong thing for so many people that it kind of carries you through.
Yeah, I mean, the power of music and how it can bring people together and kind of, like, uh, keep like, heal broken relationships,
Mm.
and take you on adventures that you never thought you would go on is just, like, incredible. I can't think of anything in the world that's better than art and music.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It's almost like there's a kind of instinctive thing that kind of goes on when in the intro when we started and I was talking about how we kind of make snap judgments on people, and how bad that can be in some circumstances, but in other circumstances it can be where you're just sort of trusting your instincts, and it's just like, okay, I know that this person is right for me. It's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw Mike for the first time, he was in high school. He was like, he had long hair and he was walking around and he had like a Brian Jones Massacre button on his backpack or something like that. And I was like, I want to be that guy's friend. And I was older than him, so we didn't have classes together. But I was like, I'm gonna figure out how to hang out with that kid who likes rock and roll because I really like rock and roll, and I gotta hang out with him. And so I started eating lunch with Mike, and if you had told me when I was 17 that I was gonna be hanging out with that guy every day
Mm.
until I was in my late 30s, I would have been like, "Whoa, it's great."
Have you have you sort of how do you deal with things like because I guess to preface it, the world now is so much more kind of complex and kind of difficult to sort of work through. It's very volatile. I mean, how do you deal with sort of uncertainty? In just in life in general.
I think when I was younger, I often would kind of bemoan how difficult it was to be like an independent musician because of the amount of uncertainty and that
Mm,
there aren't like a lot of resources for us to land on when things go badly. But now that I'm older and I know more about the world, I'm more keen to the fact that everyone has to deal with uncertainty, and everyone has to deal with really
mm,
not knowing which way they're going. And I think, I was under the illusion as a child that when I was an adult, I would have it all figured out and I would know exactly where I was off to at any given time. But the truth is that I have no idea what's going on and I'm just making it up every single day. And the way that I deal with it often, and I think a lot of people do, is just to ignore it because you can't control
mm,
the cards that you're dealt. You can't control fate. You have to let things fall where they may, and sometimes things work out perfectly, and you probably take it for granted, and sometimes everything
mm.
goes terribly wrong, and that's the stuff you never forget.
I think, yeah, I think you're right there. Definitely, it's things that are outside of your control. I think we all know it's like pointless, kind of worrying about them, but we do it. I guess it's a kind of protective thing that our brain has, that sort of puts on us, to you know try and stop us from kind of acting irrationally and things like that. But the reality is that there's so much that's outside of our control. We can't. You're right, totally right there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an actual reason why we have the capacity to worry. It protects us in a lot of ways, but then there are many instances where, if I'm laying in my bed late at night worrying about the like irreversible effects of climate change, I'm just like, you
Mm.
know what, Marissa, now's not the time to worry about that. What you need
Yes.
to worry about right now is trying to go to sleep. Um, so yeah, it's tough out here.
That kind of 3 o'clock in the morning thing is, yeah, it's been an awful thing where you kind of wake up and it's just like, oh my god, why are you kind of
Yeah,
worrying about this?
I think that a lot of people have always been dealing with uh, having egregious amounts of anxiety, and I think that COVID finally laid a lot of those things bare and made it more acceptable, socially acceptable for people to talk about
Mm,
those anxieties that maybe they hadn't shared previously because they thought maybe they were weak or stupid.
yeah,
And now a lot of people are finding commonality in their struggle, which is good because then you can talk about it.
yeah. No, that's very true. I mean, if it, like I mean, not wanting to sort of dwell on COVID because we're kind of out of it now, but y- in terms of your sort of creativity and keeping your kind of mindset, active. What is it that really kind of works for you?
It's really hit or miss. Like sometimes I really feel like playing my instrument or drawing a picture, and honestly, sometimes I really don't. Like I want to just sit around and watch like 500 episodes of some shitty show.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people like romanticize artists as constantly being like inspired and always kind of like just effortlessly like perfecting their craft or practicing their craft. And sometimes you just don't want to. I'm pretty much just
yeah,
like anyone who has any hobby. It's just kind of feels like my hobby got out of control. um, but
yeah,
I forget
yeah.
the question.
It kind of became a lifetime thing. Yeah, it's not so much
Yeah.
of a hobby now, is it? It's kind of
No.
like inverted commas your career.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my partner is she's a photographer, but she's also sort of painting now, and uh, I think that there is that I should be trying to it's stopping that and just sort of taking a step back and saying, well, it's okay not to do it. It's okay not to feel it. Just don't do it.
Yeah, I have to remind myself of that a lot. Like if it doesn't feel good, I don't necessarily have to force myself to do it. But then I also think there's this kind of like unspoken practice of making yourself uh like sit, for example, like sit at the piano and play a little bit even if I'm not feeling like it because you have to constantly kind of be participating in your craft, even if you're not feeling overcome by inspiration, because something might happen, something might come out. Um,
Mm,
and the more you expose yourself to to practicing your craft, the greater the likelihood is of something good coming out. So I think some of like the best moments that I've had in drawing or writing music come when I'm just kind of like idly playing a guitar and walking around the house or doodling
mm.
and on hold with CBS or something like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I this graphic design course that the teacher was saying, look, just get into a habit of taking a kind of sketch pad or even just like a little notebook and out with you everywhere that you go. Just take it, and then because you never know where it might sort of come from, and just sit down whenever you sit down, just take it out and just if you feel like doing something, do it.
yeah, I mean, I bring a sketch pad everywhere I go, and I have for my entire life, and I have them all in my room, and so I can look back on all of them and tell you exactly probably what year it was and where I was when I
Yeah.
doodled whatever the doodle is.
Have you kind of uh, I guess there's a lot sort of written about kind of what a good life looks like, and we're trying to live our best life and all that sort of stuff. Looking back over the years, how has your own kind of vision for that changed at all, or do you really just kind of like live day by day?
Um, I definitely reflect on my life a lot, and I'm I'm really like proud of all the things that I've done. A lot of it seems really unbelievable to me. I
Mm,
can't really wrap my head around a lot of the experiences I've had and opportunities I've that have been like provided to me through streaming females.
yeah.
And sometimes the what makes me feel really crazy is that if I live a good long life, that I'm only like halfway through it, and
Yeah.
I can't imagine like what other things might be coming down the path, because I am already kind of like so grateful and awestruck by
Mm,
the things that I've been able to do.
yeah. I think that yeah, it's interesting, like how I think how we sort of change as people. I kind of felt it myself, sort of changing as a person. And I think that, kind of what I want out of life has changed over the years, I think. Even though like I guess my kind of core values, which I really got from my dad predominantly, he was the one that was sort of more kind of passionate about things, about kind of causes and things like that. Or certainly he was more vocal than my mum was, and I picked up a lot of stuff from him. I don't think those have sort of changed for me, but the perhaps kind of what I want from life does change, and I think I feel that I'm kind of okay with that, because that just sort of shows that that's like an evolution of me as a person, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as people grow, their desires change, the things that they need to live change, the places that they want to go and see are going to change. So, um, the one thing that's remained constant for me throughout my life is that I want to be involved in art, and
Mm,
however that, however I can keep art and music in my life is the path that I'm going to follow.
yeah. Have you kind of found that um, you've taken you take more risks as you get older, or different risks, perhaps?
Um, I think by a lot of people's standards, Mike and Jared and I still live pretty high risk lifestyles. Like, especially, as we're getting older, people are like, "Oh, damn, you drive in a car for like sometimes 10 hours a day," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
Um, our other people are amazed that we still sleep at friends' houses. that we like drive ourselves in Europe, all kinds of stuff that we're just so used to. It doesn't
Mm,
really even like move the meter at all. But I think, yeah, by some other people's standards who are our age, people who are settling down and sleep in the same bed every night and have kids and like office jobs or whatever. I
mm.
think that my lifestyle to them is probably very high risk.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that perhaps for me, yeah, I think it kind of changes. I think definitely kind of like physical risks definitely not as not as much now.
Yeah,
Definitely
I
not on
mean,
that side.
there's like this whole kind of conversation that's probably painfully boring about being an older musician that isn't talked about when it comes to like what it does to your body and
Mm,
how sitting in a car for upwards of 6 hours a day really does start to hurt and you notice it, and sleeping on a floor starts to hurt and you notice it,
yeah,
and it's weird getting old, but it's probably weird getting older when you have any job. It just so happens that we probably live a little rougher than other people. But we still put ourselves in it, not intentionally, but in precarious situations
mm,
relatively often. So, we've definitely, we just finished a national tour and had to drive home from San Francisco, basically following like this massive blizzard. And I think for like 3 hours one day, I was driving like 25 miles an hour down a road that was just made out of ice. And
oh
I was just
wow,
like, I had that experience before. We've had so many bad experiences driving in the snow. So I wasn't really like alarmed. It was more just like, ugh, again, this sucks. And I think for maybe some other people who just maybe haven't had that prior experience, they'd be like, oh my God, this is fucking terrifying. But
yes.
been there, unfortunately.
What about what about fears and kind of like anxieties and how you sort of handle those?
I mean, my biggest fear, to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, and one of my biggest anxieties is what am I going to do when this is all over? Because, like I
Mm,
said, nothing can last forever. But I'm hoping that I just die before that happens, so I don't have to deal with it. Um, so yeah, that's something that I think about a lot. And if I do, and we do get the wonderful opportunity to do this well into our old age, what that's going to look like, how
mm,
we're going to handle it, what the musical landscape is going to look like. Are we going to be able to like persevere with the changing times? We're already a band that's 18 years old, so I want to say
mm.
yes, but that anxiety will always kind of like be present. And I think it's probably a healthy anxiety to have because it's very, very valid. And um,
I
yeah,
think it's
the,
I think it's a kind of positive anxiety. That it's you're very, very sort of self aware and aware that of that it could end. And it's okay. Well, what happens? But I think that you have a like an immense kind of range of things that you've sort of picked up. Adaptability, resilience, all those kind of things. When you talk about okay, what's going to come next, I think you've got that in kind of spades.
yeah, I mean, it's the anxiety of wondering what's going to come next, but also the anxiety of something really wonderful happening to you for such a long period of time, and you just never want it to end.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what Screaming Females has felt like to me, even with, its ups and downs and our difficulties and successes. It's like um, just kind of a, a blissful life that I've been
yeah.
allowed to live. And uh, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.